All right, we're recording. So yeah, again, very excited for you to be here. Thank you for like replying to my email and just like setting this thing all up. But yeah, and just go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Toniko Pantoja.
Hmm.
I work primarily as a story artist in the animation industry here in LA.
Hmm.
I've done some freelance 2D animation work for some productions here and there, but I primarily work as a story artist. I've been in the industry as a full-time since 2014. I've worked at studios such as DreamWorks, Amazon, Netflix, Strange Weather Films, but I've also worked as an animator for smaller studios like Tonko House, Studio Le Cachet, amongst other small studios.
Yeah, yeah, because like I noticed like because most industry artists are usually like story artists, but like I do know you had like noticed you have a couple like animation jobs too, like straight up animation jobs. And like one of them wanted to talk to you about was for like Clarence because like you
Mhm.
because like that was like my probably like my first exposure to your work. And like I don't remember the name of the episode, but I know like your scene was like you were animating like these woodland creatures and it felt like it was supposed to be like a sort of like a riff on like Don Blue stuff, like cigarette
Yeah,
and all that crap. And like I remember seeing that tweet where you said like you had like 1 month for it. And it's just insane because it's just like the animation itself is very like I kind of don't use it, I kind of don't like using the term like theatrical level, but like it did feel like that on like a TV level schedule and the TV level budget. And that must have been crazy. But I'll talk to you about that a little later. But for
yeah.
just start from the very beginning. Like why'd you want to become an animator, a boarder, all that stuff? What got you into art?
Well, I was exposed to animation at a really young age. So, growing up in Indonesia, my parents had a Betamax player, and the only thing we had were like animated films from Disney or obscure ones. I think those, well, not, did I say DVDs? I meant like
But
beta
Betamax.
tapes.
Yeah.
Yeah, beta
Big back
tapes.
in the
So I don't think the Betamax is a popular format over here in the States, but in Asia it was still pretty thriving. So I grew up with stuff like The Last Unicorn,
day.
The Little Prince, and like Rescuers Down Under. Uh, but like, I grew up with anime, like a lot of people here, like
Yep.
growing up with a lot of anime that would do it too.
Mhm.
Um, and I didn't think it was until the end of high school that I decided to go into animation. Before I wanted to go into like VFX. Because like when I saw Lord of the Rings in theaters, I was like, this is it. This is it for me. And that made me want to like check out VFX. So I learned like I tried to get into like 3D Studio Max at the time, like a pirated copy of 3ds Max 5 and just trying to learn it. And I realized it was super hard. But I was always hanging around sites like Newgrounds, which I don't know if you're familiar with Newgrounds, but it's like a Flash portal website where people could make like Flash games and
Yeah.
cartoons. And I eventually got into the Flash community, started making like cartoons there too. Slowly teaching myself animation, not knowing what the principles were and all that. I didn't think it was until like the end of near the last half of my high school where I mean I was really into anime, but that's why I was doing Flash cartoons. But getting an appreciation for like Disney and Don Bluth stuff
Hmm.
made me sort of like see, oh, this is a thing. But I didn't think that you could go to school for it. So like I wanted to go into either like VFX or CG animation or concept art. I hung out at like concept art communities a lot. It wasn't until like I visited Sheridan College back in maybe 2007 that I just like took a visit at the school, passed by the animation department, and there were just like students just like, communicating with each other, showing work, making like animation and cartoons. And I was like, I actually want to try this out. Because I was also thinking of like going into like live action film. But I think I decided that I wanted to try animation like close to my graduation. I was like applying everywhere, but I didn't. I was just like looking at whatever was convenient. I think the Arts Institute was like back then when the Arts Institute chain was still around. I looked at that too. But no, I think like it was a lot of things that got me into animation, but I would say like maybe, like I said, like anime, Newgrounds, and eventually like an appreciation for like classical 2D animation, like got me more interested in the art form.
Yeah. Um, like because like I was talking with like a friend about your work the other day, and he like described it as like a sort of like intersection between like anime and like Don Bluth and like Gene Keen stuff with like because like you do have like that sort of like anime-ish look with your drawings, but like you place such an emphasis on like specific secondary motions. It's like, oh, a character moves around, like, oh, this is like the secondary detail of like their hair moving or like their clothes or like their fabric moving, instead of just like being just like, oh, a character turns into like minimal hair animation. It's just like it feels very like lavish, and that's why I sort of like get where he was coming from. The whole thing about like Newgrounds culture is interesting to me too, because like I was around for like Newgrounds, but like I was very, very young. I should have been like on that site in the first place. I'm
I
also,
don't think any, I mean, I got onto that site when I was like 11 or
oh
12.
God, I was on
So
Newgrounds when I was like what, 7, 8? Definitely should
yeah,
have been there regardless. But like
and
I
it's
was,
like that, yeah, that website had like banners for like porn sites.
oh
And it was just
God.
like plastered all over. And I remember my sister would walk in, it's like, ew, porn.
No, I
But
wasn't
I
there.
wasn't, yeah,
I was
that's
just
just a
there for like
banner.
I was less for like the animation culture I was interested in because like I was 7. What did I know? I was just mostly there for like the Sonic Flash games. But
Oh, hell yeah. No,
yeah, but yeah.
I remember watching a lot of like Sonic fan animations, whether it was like sprite cartoons or hand-drawn ones. I still remember some of the artists that made that. Like there was one, it's like, um, uh, was it? No, it was like Mario versus Sonic, and it
Oh,
was like the most like motion tweened madness, but it was such a vibe. Like the backgrounds were just like morph left and right, and the characters they were all like relatively well drawn back in the day, but it was just like, yeah, there's a vibe to it. And then living in Indonesia at the time, I'd have to wait like 30 minutes at least to watch
oh,
like a minute
hello.
cartoon.
Oh God. Like I thought I had it bad when I had to wait like 2, 3 minutes to watch the cartoon.
Oh no, and internet in Southeast Asia was so bad. It's like I had to like sometimes get friends to help me upload stuff because they had a better connection. And like Newgrounds would always time out on me. So, and this is back when like we had like a 10 megabyte
Mm.
limit.
Man, but yeah, I mostly remember like the whole DBZ sprite styled stuff that really like blew me away because I was also like really into DBZ at the same time. Like, really, what kid wasn't in the DBZ at the time?
Yeah.
So,
No, you
yeah.
unlocked the memory because like I think what got me to Flash cartoons was seeing the parody like sprite animations with Mega Man and Castlevania. Because like I was also interested in like sprite art, and I tried to like actually like I remember when I was 10 or 11, I wanted to help out this like Castlevania fan game. So I
Hmm.
tried making my sprites for them, and they flat out said like your sprites suck, man, stop. And I
Oh
would just keep
God.
sending them like, here's my sprite, here's my fine character. And then like I didn't really know how to animate back then, so like the whipping animation always made zero sense. But it was just like I think that's also part of it. I tried a lot of different things back then.
Like also like I know like the new grunge culture back in the day was also like they're like the kind of people who like they'll tell you like it is. They won't sugarcoat it and like that'll either help you or break you. But like a lot of the like artists who were born out of that were like they became really good. I wouldn't necessarily say like
Hmm.
because of it, because it's just like people were like a little too mean back in the day, but like still.
I
It
think I mean, back then it was a very
was a different time.
niche group compared to like web animation or
Yeah.
online animation was such a niche group. Like now you get a lot of people like teenagers working in anime now.
Mm,
For a lot of us back then, like back in the 2000s, that was our dream.
yeah.
To see that happen now, it's like, oh shit, maybe if we were in a different generation, that could have been us. But at the same time, it's like, dealing with that community, a lot of like angsty teens.
Mm.
So like a lot of the sort of the feedback you get kind of got way too personal,
Oof.
or they didn't, yeah, it wasn't really handled right. So um I mean, I'm glad that I went through it because it taught me that like you said, they're not going to sugarcoat anything regardless if it's constructive or not. So it did sort of prepare me for like school and animation and working in the industry because it's not as toxic as that, but there are some things in it that's very similar to like what it was like doing stuff in Newgrounds.
Mm-mm. Okay. All right. So after that, like also a question, like, so you said you were interested in Sheridan, but I know that's up, I know it's up in Canada. So like where you went?
Yes.
Oh, so like
I went to Sheridan for a year
okay.
because I got rejected for the animation program. So like they offered to like a art fundamentals program, which is like a year of just like life drawing, graphic design, painting, just to get a basic grasp of like your art fundamentals. So I went to Sheridan for art fundamentals. I got pretty close to a lot of animation students there. Um, I when I was working on my Sheridan portfolio for the animation program, I was also making a portfolio for Cal Arts. And like Cal Arts, I had to submit way like a semester earlier than Sheridan. So like I already heard back from Cal Arts like sometime early, like maybe during around spring, and they accepted me as an animation student. And then I was still waiting for Sheridan because it's like, well, it is so much easier getting Canadian citizenship if I went through like the Sheridan route. And that's like back then I really wanted to get a Canadian citizenship. So I was just like waiting to hear back from Sheridan. And of course, like I didn't get it. I got rejected um, because I didn't make the mark on some things. So like I thought about appealing to Sheridan, but I think like my parents at the time encouraged me like just try going for Cal Arts because like they just recently learned at the time like the alumni from that school or the legacy of that school. Um and they just said that like it could be good only because and a lot of people in Canada also encouraged me to look into CalArts instead because it was already by the industry. Whereas like in Canada, you kind of don't. It's further from where the industry is. So yeah, I think I mean I ended up going to Sheridan. I know CalArts for
Right.
animation, but Sheridan for art fundamentals.
Oh, okay. All right. And well, how's your experience in Cal Arts then?
It was good, but at the same time, it was hard. I
Yeah.
think like not only was it because it was hard as a school and like as an animation school and trying to be the best that you can, but I think for a lot of us, it was also like a time where we were all away from home. So a lot of us were also facing our own battles of like what it's like growing up away from home or dealing with like social life stuff. And then just that really rough age of like maturing too. So I think like there are many cases where I found that difficult too. As for Cal Arts, I found it difficult for yeah, those reasons, but for animation too, I did feel like maybe it was competitive. Um, because like a lot of my classmates and friends at there would get internship offers from all these studios that I was fighting so hard to get into,
Mm.
and I would never get it. So like that kind of it made it tough on me mentally. Like I remember every summer where I got rejected, I never gave myself a break. I just said I'm just gonna keep like making stuff and doing 11-second club and animation practices to try and level up. I mean, I don't regret doing that at all, but I remember like doing because I was just like so either fearful or so like mad at the same time. So I think that's also what made it tough for me. But I think like it did pay off at the end because I think like a lot of sort of that perseverance and hard work helped me get certain opportunities, even if it takes me slower to get opportunities versus everyone else. Like there are some things I learned from that helped me in the future. Like there were some opportunities that I did end up getting, but I couldn't take them due to circumstances.
And also, like, you briefly mentioned something about like 11 Second Club. Like, what was that? Was it like a thing at your school or like something you did personally?
It was so on it's a website,
Oh, okay.
11secondclub.com, where every month it's an animation sort of like website where you get a clip, an audio clip from a random piece of media for 11 seconds, and you're supposed to animate a sound clip to that. And for me, that was like a way for me to like practice like my character acting or animation. I haven't done it since school. I thought about getting back into it, but I remember like that was like, yeah, that would be my summer project, just like working on that. So it's a site where people can practice, and the winner gets like a feedback from someone who works in the industry and is an animation mentor member. That never happened to me.
Oh, well, to be fair, that doesn't really sound like a good prize anyways. Like not even like a reward. You just get like, wow, you get feedback
Yeah,
from somebody. Like
yeah. Like at
not
first,
even money.
I
Yeah.
didn't think too hard about it, but until like I told a friend about it, they're like, "That's weird." I'm like, you know what? Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. But hey, if it helped, it helped. So okay, so you went to Cal Arts. So like how did you break into the industry? Was it like one of your student films or
I think it's a mix of both. I think like studios were familiar with the student films I've done in the past. I personally don't think I would have gotten anywhere with the student films without the student films because I think like there are a lot of like story portfolios that were way better than mine. With my first like full-time job industry was with DreamWorks Animation. Um, and they were actually looking for like story trainees that year. And so like I submitted my portfolio and then I got a call back saying, "Hey, can you do a test that a test for this month?" And they give a prompt and we're supposed to board a sequence based on that test. Super stressful because I was doing that while working on my last student film. So like I was just really, really crunching it everywhere. Um, and then after I submitted the test, I got called back for an interview. And during our school's producer show, that's when I got the offer to be a part of their trainee. And since then, I've been a full time as a story artist. It's weird because like I have a funny. I was just telling this story to my students where like every year I would apply for Pixar for either their story or animation internship, and I would always get rejected. So that year I remember like I didn't hear back from Pixar, and I was like, I'm hearing people getting like their results. Is there news on mine? And of course, Pixar would send like, due to our high number of candidate, we've decided to move forward. I'm like, okay, cool, whatever.
yeah.
Because like I was just so used to getting that from them.
Yep.
And then I get like, yeah, so I got the DreamWorks training offer. 4 days later, I get like a missed call from Pixar, and they're like, "Hey, we want to talk to you." Okay, call us back. So I called them back, and then they're like, "Yeah, we want to extend you for the animation internship." I'm like, "You guys rejected me," and then they're like, "Yes, we did, but
But
our supervisors at the producer show saw your short film, and they'd like to work. They'd like to have you a part of the internship." And I said, "I already accepted DreamWorks. I I'm sorry, but I already accepted DreamWorks. It was 4 days ago." And they're like, "Oh, okay, cool." And I just said, like, maybe in the future, we should stay in contact. And this person said, yeah, maybe. So 2 minutes after that phone call, Pixar resends that rejection letter again. Um, like they just resent, like, due to the high volume of candidates, we decided to move forward. I'm like,
what?
cool, okay. Yeah.
Wow, okay. Dang,
I
that's
have a lot of stories with Pixar, my interaction with Pixar, but I remember like that one was just like, okay. I wasn't like pissed or sad. I was just like, okay.
that was just like that's just petty, genuinely petty. And like Pixar is supposed they're supposed to be like the prestige like studio. Like everyone wanted to be like them, but like
Yeah, yeah.
and how the tables have turned.
I think like at the time like I still did regard them as a company. And I mean in places I still do, but like for me, I think it was just a matter of I think if I didn't have any choice, that like if DreamWorks never hit me up, I probably would have. But at the same time, like Blizzard wanted me too, and that was something that I was considering too. So I think like if Blizzard or DreamWorks didn't move forward with me, then I would have picked Pixar. But those two other places felt more like secure offers. So yeah, I mean, I got in. Yeah, to answer this quickly, it's through the DreamWorks story training program.
All right. Well, yeah, now would be a good time to talk about DreamWorks because like I know it's going through like a portfolio. You did like a lot of like TV. and feature stuff, and he sort of just like went back and forth between the two. So I just wanted to ask, like, which do you prefer, and like, how does it feel, sort of like, going back from like, because I know like TV's like fast, real fast compared to stuff on like on feature, and like I imagine like shifting between the two must have been like pretty, not necessarily stressful, but like pretty like strange for you. So I just asked, like, what was that experience like, basically going from TV to
Um,
feature?
from feature to TV, it was tricky because when it comes to TV, it's not just like making boards that like in feature, it's very exploratory. So like you don't have to like draw amazing with feature, just clear. And you can spend months on a single sequence just trying to figure out what this movie's about. With TV, it's very like after this, you move on to this. After this, you move on to this. And it's something that bit me in the ass was like learning how to keep track of like the staging, the proportions, like things that are very important for vendor studios. So that was something that I had to learn, and I remember that like it was hard for me to sort of wrap that around my head. And I mean, I got into like a TV show that was like hard for not good reasons, which like that show that I'm talking about made us like over animate our boards, which should not be the job of a story artist who is trying to like board out a sequence based on a script.
Yeah, and that's basically the big discourse surrounding storyboard jobs now. It's just like a lot of the young board artists doing a lot of work for not the proper amount of pay, but they have to like do all these poses, gotta time everything out themselves. They have to function as like a storyboarder and an animatic editor as themselves, and they're definitely not getting paid for that either. Yeah,
Yeah, it's tricky because like I understand why it happens.
yeah,
Both of it is just like, well, it's an artist choice, but at the same time, it's like um kind of promoted by members in the company, which I don't agree with. Like, I think a board artist job should just be a board artist job, and everything else is just like optional. Not necessarily like overstepping what the job is. But yeah, to answer that question about like what I don't know if you asked what I preferred. I guess it depends because I've been in so many different productions. Like, I mean, one of my early jobs was like helping out on VeggieTales. And then like, who knew I would be from like VeggieTales to a show like Blue Eye Samurai where I have to draw like naked, angry dudes like trying to cut each other open. It's like, and all of those like I enjoyed VeggieTales because it's just like fruits and you don't have to like think about limbs and stuff like that. And then there are other shows where it's like, oh, this is tough. This is complicated. And then something that I noticed is that like every new production, they always have a preference of what their board should be like or
yeah.
like what good work is or what style is like good or whatnot. And it's always hard for me to like juggle because like I come into production bringing what I learned from all these previous productions, and they'll say, "Oh, that's not who we are. We need you to like think like this." So I always have to like rewire myself a lot.
Yeah, that's what I heard. It's just like every show sort of like has their own like style, philosophy, pipeline, the way they do things. Like one show isn't exactly applicable to the other. So
Yeah,
so do you like the challenge of trying to, well, like, do you like that challenge of like trying to figure out like, okay, what does this show want? What does this movie want compared to like the last thing I was on? Or is it more of like frustrating? Or...
yeah. Yes and no. Yes, because like it feels really good to learn stuff and
Mm,
to like grasp something and to get a hold of something and to really understand it. So I really like that part. But sometimes like there are things where it's just so like nebulous or hard to like hit the target where it feels like I'm hitting stuff against the wall.
mm.
And of course, like that stuff can lead you to like being hard on yourself if you're someone that's like, very tough on yourself to begin with.
Also, yeah, now we're talking about like your actual industry stuff. I want to get back to like the Clarence thing. Like, yeah, how are you like contacted for that? Because like I think, yeah, like what was that like? Because again, really strict deadline, a lot of like lavish animation work. It's just like that must have been like a nightmare, but I want to hear about it.
So this was at a time when I had to leave the United States because my student visa ran out. So I was in the Philippines at the time. The people who contacted me were people that I went to school with. So networking does help a lot for sure. So like two of like either the story artists or the directors from that show who were my classmates like reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in animating like the sequence? Because it feels like this is something up your alley." And I was just like pretty excited to work with them and to see what they had in mind. So I just said yes. They gave me a really tight deadline,
Yep.
and like I remember just like spending all-nighters on it, or like because like living in the Philippines, that was like my only job. So I didn't really do much except like work and then exercise for like that month. I can't remember if it was like a month and a half or a month, but I remember like I had to work at a really fast pace.
Yeah.
To like I felt like really sharp pains around here.
Mm.
So when that started happening, I'm like, wow, this is I don't think I could do that something like that again. But like I would always try to work as smart as I could, where I don't like try to animate one shot fully and then move on to the next. Sometimes I'll just like animate all the shots as just like these minimal poses so that I could like get feedback from the folks over there. I was working with like Vitaly, Dave, and David Oakes over at Cartoon Network. Vitaly Strokas and David Oakes. Um, and like I would share them like all my rough acting choices. They would do drawovers here and there, but like I would always work in a way where it's like, is this what you want? Like I would just show pose to pose animation. And then after I would get drawovers, then it's like, okay, time to clean it up. Really it was just about like drawing those, cleaning up those poses and just like in betweening them. But okay, of course, like, you know, I didn't even I think that there were cases where I underestimated the work, where when I got into it, I didn't think it would be that hard. But when I was finally doing it, I was like, this, like some of these shots have like six characters, like emoting and stuff.
Mhm.
So yeah, that luckily the characters were simple to draw, but it was just sometimes just a lot of animation.
But because I noticed you also do like you always like post a lot of animations both on your YouTube account and a lot of it on Twitter too. So I'm just wondering like, do you kind of miss doing like animation in the industry, or like you just like keeping it like like as a personal thing? You can just do whenever you want, or do you ever just miss like doing the animation?
I think it's a bit of both. Like it's nice. Sometimes like I'll try to look for I haven't done it in a while, but sometimes I'll try to look for work, like for animation specifically. But like a lot of animation jobs do not pay well compared to like the expenses here living in LA. And being a board artist here actually does that for me. So like I remember helping out on an anime production and an indie animation production, and it's like, yeah, for me, I would treat it as like a workshop thing just because like I'm not really making money that I would live on, but it was just nice for me to like try it out. I'm taking a break from it because like there was one that took a lot of my time. And I kind of like animating personally for myself,
Yeah. Are you allowed to say what it is, or is this like an NDA thing?
the animation.
Yeah.
So there's one that's NDA. The other one was like an indie animation. It's very Japanese, but his handle's like Kazuhiko. It was like an indie web series with like a goat man and like this Oni looking dude, but it's very like very painter, not very painterly, but like maybe sketchy or loose, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, because my next question was going to ask like, how do you feel about like, because like I said at the very start, like a lot of like people are working anime now. So like I was going to ask like, oh, do you feel like selling your soul to work on anime? Because we all know how intensive and how much the work really isn't worth it. But like a lot of people still want to do it at the end of the day. So
Mm, I think people who work in anime and like are constantly doing it, I mean, some are at a place where they can negotiate pretty good rates.
yeah,
Um, but then some just do it because they love it. I was talking to another coworker about this because he also does anime work. And he was saying, yeah, like it doesn't really pay well, especially for where I live, but it's like it keeps me warm. I love animating anime. Like that's what he would say. For me, it's like, well, I like learning from it, but I don't see myself like always animating for it. It's like maybe once in a while, but at the same time, it does require a lot of energy because
Mhm.
of how detailed or how accurate you have to be with those drawings.
Yeah. Not to mention the whole like disconnect between the pipeline, considering that like one's like all the way over in Japan and you're here. So there's already like language, time zones, stuff like that. You
Yeah,
get lost because like Google Translate does so much of the heavy lifting, and like at the end of the day, machine
that's
translate.
the other thing.
Yeah.
I work with like a PA or someone who actually like walks through me of like how I would like label the charts in Japanese and stuff like that.
Well, speaking of anime, are you watching any anime this season? Are
Well, what I mean, I want to check out Dungeon Meshi because I haven't seen that one yet. Uh, I haven't really been watching any anime recently. I mean, my guilty pleasure is sometimes Baki because it's so like it's just one of those things where it's like I don't know why I'm watching this, but for some reason I'm always intrigued. It's like one of those things where it's like that was ridiculous. So like
you
maybe that's the hook of it.
also like?
Um, but no, I'm not re watching any anime series at the moment.
Hmm. Well, I guess. Well, right
Oh,
now.
Demon Slayer maybe, but I'm still waiting for episodes to come out.
Yeah, I can't escape that show. It's like it really, really blew up. And it's just like I'm not really interested in it, but it's everywhere. Same thing with like Jujutsu Kaisen and like the one like big shonen thing I'm interested in is like have you heard of Dan?
Yes, I've heard of it, but I don't know too much about it.
Yeah, that's like another thing they're promoting like the heck out of it, and it's like, oh, I can't escape it, but I'm low-key kind of interested in it because it's just like it's about like this it's about like these two teens. One believes in the paranormal, while the other believes doesn't like one believes in like UFOs. So they go out and like try to prove the other wrong. The twist is they're both right, and like the entire series is just them like based on my limited understanding, it's just like them like gaining the fights with like various like like paranormal like supernatural creatures. I'm into that.
Okay.
It's fun. And it's also being handled by Science Saru. That's like the other big draw because like a lot of
Yeah.
people know them for like Devilman Crybaby and
I
very
know it's crazy because like when I heard before like when I heard Science Saru was like adapting Devilman Crybaby, I'm like, how are they gonna do that? Because like I remember seeing like the 80s Crybaby. Oh no, sorry, Devilman.
yeah.
Like the 80s OVA, the 90s like OVA, and it's like super dark and violent. So I'm like, how is Science Saru, how is shoot, what's his name? The
Asaki Yuasa.
yeah, like how's Masaki gonna do this? Because this is dark. It's also very violent and very like brutal and sexual. And then they did it. I'm like,
Yep.
okay, cool, you guys did it.
It
Because
was
I
very
remember like being genuinely surprised when that was announced.
yeah, I was not prepared when I watched episode one when they got into the nightclub. It's just like you said, it's very dark and brutal and violent and sexual.
Yeah, like I know that the manga is also pretty dark, especially when you get into like the violence jack territory. It's like, oof, that's stuff that I can't just like wash out of my memory.
Hmm. Just like I know like a lot like that's like Gon the guy. Yeah, Gon the guy.
In the guy, yeah.
I know he's like very influential and stuff. It's just like I don't really read manga because like what's the point of reading it if the pictures don't move, you know? Like my heart lies
It's
in animation.
No,
But
I love animation too. Sometimes like I've been because I work on like a show like Invincible, like I'm actually reading, catching up with the comics, so I'm on the last compendium. But I mean, like stuff by Urasawa,
yep.
like I remember like crying on 20th Century Boy,
Hmm.
like just like reading and just like sobbing, and so it made me like start reading Monster, which is also pretty good. And I got like myself the Elden Ring manga. I love Elden Ring,
I didn't even know
the
it was
game, but then
on.
like it's a game, but then like the art of this manga,
Yeah.
it's written as a comedy, but it's like so visually like sick to look at. So like at the end of the day, it's all about stories too. But I'm also like that. I love animation too much where I'm kind of struggling between like, do I want to do like my own sort of comics or do I want to do like film and animation and stuff like that? It's tricky, man.
So yeah, so like again, so you worked with DreamWorks for a little bit, but after a certain point, you went into Netflix, and it's like because like I know Netflix when they were like really pushing for animation, they were releasing like this big new thing that's going to revolutionize and change animation entirely. and here we are now. The Netflix bubble finally burst, and like so many projects got canceled. But like, were you there for like the rise and fall for that from the very beginning, or like did you come in a little later?
I think I was there for both. Like I was there when only like half the cafeteria was filled during lunch, and then it was just growing so much where we had to take lunch in different hours because the cafeteria couldn't fit anyone
Oh,
anymore within the animation community. Um, so like I came into Netflix for a feature film that got canceled during my time at Netflix. Like it I was we were told that like it was going to go through like rewrites and sort of like redevelopment. So we were all like pushed out of it. So and we were all like hoping to come back to it because like the producers from that production will be like, yeah, you're gonna come back next month. Yeah, you're gonna come back next month. Is it? Oh yeah, maybe next month. It was like every after month it was like that. So we were always told that. And it wasn't until like I was moved onto like my third or fourth Netflix project that also got canceled where I learned that that movie was finally officially canceled. So like I think the last show that I was on at Netflix was for Blue Eye Samurai. But I came in for a canceled film. Then I moved to help a bit out on like what's that Crick McCracken show? Kid Cosmic and it was very brief. And I did some animation tests for Back to the Outback. And then I moved to Magician's Elephant. And after Magician's Elephant, I went straight to Blue Eye Samurai.
what was it like? I know you said your time was very brief, but like, I love Crack McCracken stuff. So, like, what was it like working on Kid Cosmic? What did you do for it? Was it just like boards or?
I was gonna board like an episode. Like I did, I spent like, it was a long episode. It was like 44 minutes. And I remember like me and another board artist, Chris Palmer, we were boarding a sequence for like 2 weeks on, and I was just like sitting in like the lounge, just like thumbnailing on paper. And it didn't really go anywhere for me. Like I pitched it, and I wasn't the right fit for the show. I feel like it just needed someone else that needed the right show, but they were pretty nice about it. I learned a lot from it, but it was just like one of those things where it was tough. But I learned stuff out of it.
Okay. Especially interesting hearing that like you were thumbnailing on paper, because like at the moment I hear just like mostly, yeah, everything's like, at least when it comes to pre-production stuff, everything's like pretty much like digital now. And like then when it comes to like thumbing stuff, it's just like what's the point? Because it's just like such like a hassle. Because like I remember watching like so many like videos of like back behind the scenes videos in like in the 90s and 2000s. You see like you'd see like these boards like hung up on the wall, and they would span the entire room. And like it's cool, but it's also just like you gotta like put that all up and you gotta like act everything all out, or just like, having a computer just like going through it. Digital versus like analog, like what's your preference?
I like thumbnailing on like paper or like on sort of like a flat surface. It could even just be my iPad. Like I don't thumbnail straight on the like on the storyboarding software like Storyboard Pro,
Hmm.
but I do enjoy the process of thumbnailing, whether it's on paper or just like on a Photoshop file or on my iPad using Procreate. Because like that's how I've always done a lot of my jobs at feature animation, where I would show what I was planning on paper. But now that if I were to approach it again, it's like if I were to pitch anything, I would just do it all digitally. Like I would scan my like paper thumbnails and just put them in order digitally. I think there's a joy to still doing things on paper, just because like on paper and traditionally you, you're not as precious of your drawings compared to digital, where you could spend a lot of time undoing and redoing stuff.
Okay. I know it's like this sort of like age-old debate. The more things get like sort of like digitized, because it's just because like I get where people are coming from, where it's just like when you're working digitally, it's harder to get that like authentic, naturalistic feel compared to like doing stuff that like just doing stuff like on paper, or some cases just like on cell. But I do feel like you can still, it's just harder to work towards that in digital compared to something like on paper or just on cell. But yeah.
I
Um
do think it is just a matter of preference because I know like when I just have a paper and pencil, it's like that's all I have. I know
Hmm.
with digital, it's like I have all these other tools like color and then lasso, and I can see myself like getting lost in that sauce. Um, with paper and a pencil, it's like, okay, well, that's all I have. Minimal eraser, but here we are. So, I mean, like when I was at school, I made it a point to always do all my animation assignments on paper, whereas some students were doing it digitally, just because like I like learning about. I think like when you do things traditionally, it teaches you to think more about your choices, more so than just like trial and erroring stuff. Um, like just being more conscious about timing, or like when you do something, you have to like really think about it before you have to like organize stuff before you start scanning it or doing a pencil test shoot of it. So, I mean, there's some like benefits to it as a learning device, but if we're talking strictly in the industry, I mean, industries like digital, you know.
Yeah. So, get me back to your like your time on Netflix. You said you were there for like the rise somewhat. So, like, what was it like? Like, because you said most of the times, like your movies, the parts you got worked on got canceled. So, like, what was it like at like the end of it? Like when the rise was very much over. It's just like we're on like the downfall, the
It
bubble
was just like
popped.
a lot of like ominous feelings. Like no one knew what where the studio was going. Or like the projects, like you felt like they were not telling you stuff. So it already felt kind of like weird to be in. I think after Blue Eye, I just decided to leave Netflix because like I personally felt like I didn't know what my future was at Netflix. I didn't know like how it was growing. And then like the disadvantage of like most feature productions is that a lot of them do get canceled. So like, you know, a lot of people don't. Yeah, well, I'll answer that part later, but like I yeah, I left after Blue Eye just because I just didn't know what my future was, and like the morale wasn't that great. But I just left to take a break for myself and just chill out for a good few months. And then I think like maybe 2 months later, I got a call from Ian Nabando to be a part of Invincible season two.
Yeah, I guess the last thing that's sort of adjacent to Netflix, I just wanted to ask because like there's like TV, there's feature, and then there's like streamings. Like, is there any sort of like difference in streaming, or they kind of just treat it like TV but with like a slightly longer production time?
Um, Streaming is pretty closely related, like streaming series. Um, it's pretty close to TV, except there's no hiatus. And I don't know what it's like now, or well, when I was on Puss in Boots TV, because it was Puss in Boots TV or Adventures of Puss in Boots TV wasn't like a TV show, it was for streaming. And in the union packet, it was considered new media. And there were some like weird loopholes that companies would get away with, like, oh, because
Yeah.
it's in new media, we don't have to pay them this much. Or we would only pay them this much if our production is higher than this budget. So it's like you hear stories of them like making sure they don't go beyond a certain budget to avoid like being something that should be a union pay.
And it's still kind of like it's still sort of like a grayish area even now, or like or has it gotten a little better? Or I know like I kind of try to keep up with that stuff, or is it just more of the same? Because like streaming's been like streaming is just a part of our lives now. It's not really treated as like new media.
Yeah,
So,
it's super rough. I don't think it's stable at all.
okay.
Just because like they're always trying to find shortcuts and cheaper ways to do things. And also like the job security is not as prevalent anymore. Because in the past, like you would be working on a production and then you'd already get like green lights for the next season or things like that. And then you'd have hiatus. So a break basically. With streaming series, I don't think I've ever gotten hiatus. It was more like we'll see how like this season does, and if it gets confirmed for a new green light, then we're gonna hire you like new employees. So like that I mean I've never been in TV since like I think like I came into TV during the streaming time, so I don't really know what it was like being in TV before that.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, and you mentioned that like your most recent role at the moment was like doing boards on Invincible. So I mean that feels like again, that feels like the type of show where just like I haven't seen the boards from it, but it feels like the type of show where just like you need to like board everything out and super like anatomical. So what was that like?
I'm still learning from it, to be honest. It's tough just because like I've always been the way I've always boarded was very featured. And like being on model wasn't the most important thing, but now it's like super important, especially with like 2D shows. So that's something that I have to think about too, because when I present my thumbnails and like my very, very roughs and it doesn't represent like the models, it's like some people are gonna get nervous about that.
You said like did you ever get like was there ever like a time where like you present like your roughs and it's just like it was just like oh this is like too rough or something or
Absolutely, yeah.
it was just like a matter of just like oh, okay just like take it back from the drawing board or just like did you feel a little like no they're wrong or just
I think it's a bit of both, but I think the thing that I would do, and probably an advice for anyone in our industry, is like, you know, it's expected to get a lot of like tough notes. And the thing is that like it's okay to have a certain feeling for it, to have a certain emotion about it. And I've learned recently for myself is that it's better to just like absorb the note and just let it sink in for like a few days until it becomes clear. Because like there have been circumstances or situations where like I got frustrated. So like lately I've been just like taking notes, seeing what's like stuff that is constructive or things that like I could benefit from it, regardless of like what I think about the production or whatnot,
Mhm.
and just let that sink in. And like sometimes like they'll go like, how do you feel about this? I'm like, I'll get back to you on about that maybe later, but right now I think the notes here sound pretty solid. So that's something that I learned recently because there are cases where I have like the frustration get the best of me.
And like right now are you still working well are you allowed to say this but are you still working on Invincible or have you moved on to like something else?
Well, season 3 and 4 have been confirmed.
Okay, so you're still working on that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. I was gonna ask because it's just like because I know currently at the moment like you post like a lot of like videos and tutorials and like you have like your own studio as like yeah what's going on there because like I know like in your Twitter bio you mentioned something about like having a studio is it really like it just feels like more like a collect like a web collective or just
yeah, I would say
like
Web Collective. At first,
yeah.
I thought I was gonna do like a lot of like clientele work, like doing stuff for like boutique projects, like doing a trailer for a comic. Like that's like I've always wanted to do like little trailers for independent comics. But then like there's a part of me that like every time I try to negotiate rates, it's like I can't do this for what you're asking of me. And then it would fall apart or stuff like that. So and also like lately, the reason why I haven't been doing that as much is because like I'm trying to gain as much experience as I can just doing my own stuff, so I understand the process of it,
Hmm.
like the process of like how I would do things or think like hiccups that I would find. And then so like when clients have all these questions, then I can answer them confidently or have enough material to show them that.
Okay. And like at the moment you said like you want to do like smaller boutique stuff and like do trailers or anything, but like have you thought about like because like at the moment like indie stuff is big right now. Well, quote unquote
Hmm.
indie stuff. It just kind of feels like TV level stuff on like YouTube and stuff. And I still don't know how to feel about that. But, like, do you want to like aim for like making like a show, whether like long form or like short form or no?
Definitely short form.
Okay.
Like not pilots. I do not want to do anything like that for like if I were to do indie animation, where my heart's at right now, I would not want to do pilots. I think they are a huge chunk of time. And I think like when I think about indie animation, I want to think of stuff that feels stable, and that feels doable.
Yeah.
Even if it means like super limited animation. Like that's something that I've been exploring recently, just to like see if I could like combine the best of both worlds of like a storyboard and an animation. So I look up to like animators like Worthy Kids, just because like it feel like when I look at the Worthy Kids stuff, it's super charming, it's short, very appealing, but also very smart. And I want to be more like that than like, let's say, the super popular like YouTube animated series out there right now.
Yeah, because it's like, because like my preference personally, because it's like I love stuff that's like on threes and fours and like even lower, because like I'm real big on just like kind of sort of like breaking the like yeah breaking the rules and just like you got such a good handle on motion, you could just like leave this in like you can leave this in like 4 or 5 frames, so it can still have like that sort of like like punchy, really strong feel to it, and
Absolutely.
viewers can't tell the difference at all. You're legit like you're making less, you're making worth. Sorry, you're just making it work less is more. And like sometimes when you pull it off, it really is like a lot more. And it's just like, and like you said, just like, because with indie animation, like a lot of indie animation wants to be like really polished, again, like on a TV level. And it's just, well, that's the like what's the appeal of like indie animation? Just like you don't have those restrictions, you don't have those guidelines, you can just do like whatever you want.
Yeah.
You just like embrace that more instead of just trying to like, trying to make like a TV series and you just like post on YouTube. I'm just like, it's not that I honestly don't think like it's not fun either, Just
It's
make what you
yeah, like well, the world of indie animation too, like there are parts of it that's pretty incestuous where it's like indie animation has to be like has been hotel or this other thing like lackadaisy or else it's not worth it, which like there are some people that have that mindset. Whereas it's like I think we shouldn't even like have that crazy of a standard and just
want.
explore what this thing could be, even if it does break certain rules.
I've seen like you mentioned Worth the Kids briefly, and like I watched some of their. I'm not really like into his stuff fully, but like you said, like very like short and economic. Not like an emphasis on like lavish motion, but it's just more of just like stuff like on very like low drawing counts or like frame rate counts because he does everything
Mhm.
like CG, but like he does everything like Blender, but like he managed to like capture that appeal where people just like sort of question like, is this 2D or is this like 3D?
Absolutely, yeah. It made me question that a lot too.
And like he shows it and it's like all 3D and then your brain just like it just explodes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Learning the line is always fun because like right now James Baxter is like another like big name. He was always like a big name, but now he just like really blew up because all of his guest animation on like TV. And he's like another like animator that like managed to like blur the lines between like 2D and 3D and the viewers like, whoa, what is this? What am I looking
Mm.
at? And like I always love stuff like that.
Yeah, like I do enjoy like for me, I'm not necessarily the type of person who's like, oh, I want to be fooled. It's more like, oh, I want to see like just good work in general, or like work that just feels a bit honest, or work that feels like it's thinking about the whole production rather than just like animation or how it looks. Like Worthy Kids, for example, like it's not the most like polished or the most fluid stuff, but at the same time, it's like, well, the vibe, the aesthetics, and everything else feels so like good that like I can't see. Well, maybe I could see like the animation being in a different style, but for now, it's also appealing. It's kind of like how I felt about like Big Mouth, where like when I saw those designs at first, I'm like, this is ugly, and then like I watched the show, I'm like, yeah, the humor matches the designs, and I love it.
Yeah, I like how you described it as just like a vibe. Because like whenever I just talk with my friends, like 9% of like animation discourse with my friends is just like it's just a vibe.
Yeah, like I
People
like
just like
shoot.
vibes.
I think here's my hot take on like indie animation. I think like people who get into indie animation should really start watching like indie films because all the popular indie animation just all feels like mainstream pilots that you see
Yeah.
on TV.
Yep.
So like a lot of the indie films are very like non-conventional, or like they're just like vibes or very small moments. Like that's stuff that I would want to do. Like I would write, let's say like a packet or a pitch Bible if I want to pitch in the future. But if I were to like make animated stuff of those things, I would probably just do random scenes of them like interacting with each other. It doesn't have to correlate to like the main story. It doesn't have to be in order, but it could just be like a vibe or like a
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah. People like that. People like that. Because you're like, there's this whole thing when it comes to like script writing. It's just like, oh, the guy could do like the hero's journey. It's like, oh, this has to happen. So like X, Y, and Z can happen. And the audience can like fall for that. But like people do just like seeing characters like as long as they know them long enough, people do like just seeing characters like hang around, just like do stuff and like be normal. Especially like the more like fantastical or like odd the setting is, the more appealing it is. Because like contrast is always like fun to mess around with. So drifting away from like indie talk.
Mhm.
I've only seen like brief snippets from like Blue Eye Samurai. But, like I did watch a little bit of like your video, and you do mention you had to like they were like the approach was like live action, and it's just like okay, so
Yeah.
talk about that. Could you like talk about that for a little bit?
Well, so a lot of our supervisors came from World of Live Action, so they were very like super they like onto like lenses and things like that. Maybe it's definitely a CG thing too, but I think like they would talk about being super economic with your camera choices.
Okay.
Like make like and it was stuff like thinking about boarding in a way that editors could play around with too. Because like I would board certain things in a certain order, and then they would like look at it and rearrange things to like play around with like the filmmaking language or the script. So it was just one of those things where we had to board. When I say economic, it's more about like the shot choices. That's what I mean by economic. Like those, so some of those boards are like some of the most detailed boards I've ever done for boarding. Um, but when I say economic, it's like find a way to shoot this sequence in like less than 6 shots, for example. So that kind of economic language, and then also like um, it would like I think like strong blocking was also a big thing, and like really thinking about the set as a cinematic language more so than just like a set where characters are at. So with and also like just thinking about like I mean for me it was just animation with like a very grounded style, but because a lot of people came from live action, they would always talk about like things that don't matter in animation, like, oh, why would you put the camera there? It would not fit in a set like that. But it's like this is we're dealing with like not real sets. We could like put the wall back or not. But it was just something to be thoughtful about too. And more graphic shots too. So like shots where it's just like a close up of a plate. Um, because like in animation, I'm so used to like just boarding where the character has to be on screen all the time.
So like, what do you mean by boarding on the plate?
Oh, like that's just a prop, like a close
Oh,
up on a
oh,
vase
oh
or a
my God.
hand. Yeah.
Okay. I thought like plate was some kind of like animation term I didn't know about. It's like,
No,
oh,
no, no, no.
oh.
I mean, like I remember watching Vinland Saga, like season two,
Yeah.
and it's very similar to like Blue Eye Samurai, where it's like long takes of like a close up on an eye or a hand. Just like very like visual storytelling shots without having the need to show what the character's face is feeling.
Yeah. Also, when it comes to anime, just like, yeah, if you want like economic, then like, of course, the best place to reference is just like anime because it's just like economic
Yeah.
per game.
But it was just also like a lot of like very decisive compositions. So we reference like David Lynch, or like French New Wave. So it had that kind of like cinematic language that, you know, isn't like the most animation friendly style, but it's like, yeah, very cinematic.
I guess like my last question to round things out would be like, if you have one, like, what's your goal? What's like the one thing you want to do in the industry? And like, when you do it, you feel like you've made it, or just like in that moment, just like, what's the one thing you want? Like, what's your big goal in the industry? Like, what's the one thing you want to do? Whether it's like a movie or just like direct a show, be a
Oh
showrunner.
man, I don't know.
Uh,
Directing a feature sounds more like something that I would do, as much as like the idea of like being a showrunner sounds pretty cool. I just see all my friends who did it the most like stressed out that
yep.
they've ever been and just so tired. And it's like, well, I don't know if I love animation that much, but I love animation where I would do like small things by myself. Like for me, I'd like to just continue like making shorts or small things. But I think like I do see myself like maybe directing a feature. Maybe. I think like after directing one feature, then maybe I'd say, okay, I've tried it. I could just do my own thing or maybe do another thing like that. But I feel like it once I like and just that's just my answer to keep the answer short. But knowing myself, I can see like if even if I got that, I don't think I would feel like I've made it. I would say this isn't enough. I want more,
Oh,
regardless of what that is. So that's how I think that would how it would personally go for me. I personally don't think I've ever felt like I've made it, but I can say that like breaking into like a full-time major full-time as a full-time in a major animation studio, it's like, okay, all my hard work paid off more so than like I've made it.
I mean, looking back, saying I made it was probably like a bad way of referring it, but it's just
And
like,
no, it's fine because it's like I think like it's a discussion that a lot of my coworkers have. Like, when do you feel like you've made it? And I think like over time I've realized that like I know that I would always want more once I like hit a certain milestone for myself. Like, let's say for me, it's like I want to be an episodic director, and it'll take me like a while. And let's say I hit that role of being an episodic director. I know there's a part of me deep inside that goes, "This is cool, but I want more than this."
okay. Also, like, have you done? Well, you said you haven't done episodic direction. That's like what you want to do. That's another like position I've been curious about because just like because I was talking to about other people and most of like episodic direction is more just like you're directing like the boards and very rarely anything else. But like that's what I just like heard. So I
Yeah.
don't
It's
um
also like very taxing because you have to be involved with like meetings and people,
mhm.
like a lot of like delegations. So, like as much like I say, like, yeah, that's a goal that I want to hit for myself one day. I look at like my director's like calendar, see how it's all like filled out. I'm like, thank God I can wrap up work at like 6:30 to 7 and just do my own thing and have a life. So there's a joy to like not doing that too. But I think in terms of like career wise, it is good to have on a resume. It does make people see you differently for like certain opportunities. So I think for me, it really comes down to like the stripes uh to look better for opportunities. But in reality, a director's job is like, yeah, um, I'd like to give it a shot, but at the same time, it's like I'm not in a rush to get that.
You'll get there when you get there.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like, well, it happens, it happens. If not, then I'm just gonna like do stuff for myself too. Because like there's a lot of things in animation that I love, um, that the industry will not offer me. So the only way that I can do that is either doing my own personal projects and making stuff that feels honest to me, regardless of whether it's like like good or amazing to look at. It's like it's soul searching, right? So it's like either way, I'm gonna always try to find a way to sort of express that side of me.
If there's anything you just want to like plug before we end it, go ahead and say it.
What's something that I'd like to plug? Oh man, there's a lot, but I think the one I could see is that like for animation, um, and it comes back to like the whole talk on being honest with your work. So whether it's like trying to say something, regardless of whether it's like hitting the principles of animation or if it's the right story to tell, I think that those are roads worth exploring. I can't remember who talked about it or who said it, but like there are geniuses out there. Like maybe like let's Hideo Kojima, Metal Gear, right? I think this person was saying that like Hideo Kojima's ideas are super weird. Death Stranding, what? Like Hideo Kojima, right?
Somewhat. I know about Metal Gear Solid at least. So
Okay, but like all of his ideas are just like batshit insane. So like if you were to pitch it, you're like, we don't get it. That is weird. We don't see it. But then he's killing it out there in the games industry. And it's one of those things where it's like I feel like creators who feel lonely or creators who who are trying to do stuff that isn't the most explored. are going to feel that sense of sort of loneliness, but I think it's an important road to explore. Because I think like, you know, the world of like art making or being creative needs to see that type of stuff come to fruition. I don't know if that makes sense.
Thank you for taking out the time to interview me. It was a real pleasure talking with you. And bye.
Take it easy, man. Thanks so much for today.
All right, later.
Bye.